Hello, Blizzard here, back with another video that I hope you guys will enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you don't miss a video. For now, let's start. Chapter 4 Issue 4 Bank Heist. Bakugo Katsuki felt like he was going to explode. Aldera School was shitty, with assholes who didn't even know him showing up with dumbass questions like, "How did you find that villain? What was it like to be rescued by that other villain?" And the teachers, fuck the teachers. Always acting like he needed somebody to talk to. "My door is always open, if you want to talk about it, please keep me in mind." Fawning over him like that just made him sick. Bakugo didn't want to talk to any of those fuckers. He really didn't like the feelings that remembering the experience bring up. The choking, the helplessness. He is not, and never has been helpless. He's never needed help from anybody. Needing help makes him useless, weak. If that's what being Deku was like, he wants none of it. Doesn't want his greatness to be dismissed and thrown away just because he needed help. Really doesn't want to be treated as lesser and made of glass for some bullshit involving bad circumstances that prevent people from seeing his potential. Bakugo was ever so slightly pissed off that teachers tended to say that Deku was smart in spite of being quirkless. Bakugo would never admit it, but Deku did do consistently better in a wide variety of subjects than him. It kept him on his toes, trying to outsmart the nerd. Not that he cared about Deku or anything. And the fucking irony of the situation was, Izuku Deku didn't do that stupid fucking thing that he did all those years ago. He's not there treating him like a baby and asking him if he needs help. Oh sure, if there's some discussion he looks sympathetic, the little fucker. But otherwise he hasn't brought it up independently. That hurt for some reason. Bakugo scowled. Well, if the nerd doesn't want to fucking do that dumb thing where he reaches out and gives him a hand that is unnecessary and unwanted, then he'll leave him alone. About time that the nerd realized that Bakugo Katsuki isn't so weak as to need a hand. Even though he will never admit it to anybody, but he wouldn't mind one. Deku just kept tinkering at his desk, the damn nerd. When he looked up as Bakugo slammed down into the seat in front of him, Bakugo just knew that the damn nerd was smiling for some fucking reason. But he hasn't mentioned that fucking slime villain, so Bakugo guesses it's alright. Kachan's my best friend. No, really, he is. Even if he'll never say it, I know Kachan. I think that with a great villain, he's going to be the best, and that super villain is going to be me. I have to admit, Kachan's, well, explosive. He's rude and arrogant, and he treats others pretty badly. There's a lot of things that I dislike about him, almost hate, but at the same time, when I see him in my mind, I can't help but think of victory. Think of those times that he beat up those kids who were a couple of years older than us and then grinned like it was nothing. I see Kachan pushing himself harder and harder to get those skills that others say are natural talent down to that level. I see him, smiling and confidently leading other kids around like it's natural. Glaring down teachers and older kids alike with no fear. I can see the slight hurt in his eyes whenever the teachers and other kids praise his quirk, his grades, everything but him. Never noticing the hard work and just saying that he's gifted. I can see him try to express how much he respects somebody else by going, "You are not just a shitty extra," and not being able to find different words for it. I want to say that I saw him on that day and that he needed help back then and I gave it, but that would give the game away of my identity. Then Kachan will kill me and then I'll be arrested. Man. Being a supervillain is almost as tough as being a superhero. Chorus Cafe was an ideal spot for Midoriya Izuku to get a little bit of extra money from a summer job. It's also, conveniently, near the building that he was scoping out for his next villainous act. It is a high-class cafe, with a strict dress policy for its servers. It's this dress policy that made Mastermind realize something that would give him the necessary look. The source of inspiration was at hand. This is it. This is what I was looking for without even realizing it. He checked himself in the locker room mirror. Black slacks leading down to a pair of well-shone black loafers. A white shirt with a black tie, with a black sleeveless vest over it, neatly buttoned up. Looking at himself in the mirror, Izuku felt like he did when he built his first piece of support equipment. He checked the pockets, spinning a little. For some reason this just feels right. Like this was meant to be. Midoriya Izuku was shaken out of his reverie by the manager coming in. "Alright, kid, let's go." He looked at Izuku's throat. "How the hell did you do that with your tie?" The tie was short, fat and stubby, which seemed impossible considering that the tie had been a skinny one. Izuku winced. Sorry, it's just how my dad always did up his tie, and he showed me how to do it." His manager sighed. How you can fool around with the coffee machine like you were born to improve it but can't tie your tie properly is beyond me. He gestures. I'll help you do it this once. I hate to say it, but you might need a clip-on. But only because I can't see how you'd mess a clip-on up. Izuku nodded, blushing. His tie wasn't that bad. Right? After his tie had been fixed up, Izuku worked hard for the rest of the day. Idly he noticed what looked like a father and daughter pair also checking out the bank. The older man asked for some pretty expensive tea while his daughter asked for a straight black coffee. Okay. We'll be right back. The father and daughter nodded, the man thanking him and wishing him well. Something about the man seemed familiar, but Izuku couldn't place it. Well, it was sure to come back to him. It had been a long day after school and his summer job. Deep in the evil lair, TM, Izuku Midoriya checked over his latest project. Yes. He breathed. It had taken a while to assemble the components, but it was all ready. The mannequin had given him an idea. Sure, he knew that he'd need other people to pull off bigger jobs, but what if he had some extra help? More specifically, if he had a fake body, rigged to do his evil bidding. Like Dr. Doom, a devilish body double so that he could never be caught. As a last resort, he could destroy it, leaving no trace back to him. After hours of work, he had completed one of his most demanding projects so far. It stood in front of him, waiting to be powered on. A mannequin's body housing a variety of electronics, outfitted in a copy of his newest villain look. Underneath the costume, there were powerful industrial strength servos designed to mimic human movement as much as possible. In Izuku's hands was the remote control for the unit along with a microphone for speaking through it. What? Izuku had to go to school, got most of his components from the beach or his underfunded public school and had a budget that was nanofiber thin even with his stash of looted support gear. Developing an AI that not only could pass a Turing test but could Turing test itself was just not feasible. So a remote-controlled body would have to do. Yes. He gripped his thunder machine. Yes. Thunder rolled once more. It's finally ready. The diabolical electronic kick-ass unit is ready. MWAHAHAHA. He pressed the power button, confidently. The robot in front of him shuddered to life, lights flicking on. And then the arms shot off, one leg collapsed, dumping the whole body on the ground, and the other leg flailed around in ways no human leg should. Then it caught fire. Izuku sighed, grabbing the fire extinguisher. Well, that's beta 1 of the Deku. Really wanted it to work, but I've just found how not to build an android replica of myself. Obvious faults in the limbs and power cell as well as general structure. Spraying it down, he turned around. But my newest outfit and gadgets, on the other hand. He pressed the thunder machine just for dramatic effect. The heroes won't know what's coming. MWAHAHA. MWAHAHA. The door above banged, and Izuku's secret security camera picked up his mother at the basement door. Izuku. It's time for dinner. Izuku's head whipped around. Okay. Thanks Mom, what are we having? His mother just smiled. We're having curry rice. Izuku sniffed. Smells great Mom. He bounded up the stairs, turning off the lights. As he went up, various shutters and organizational bits and pieces folded up and came down, protecting vulnerable pieces of tech and plans from his mother's eyes. Supervillainy would have to wait until tomorrow. My mom? She's the best as well. When I didn't have my quirk, and I asked her that question of if I could be a hero, she broke down. It wasn't the answer to the question that I wanted then. But after self-reflection and changing my goal, I started on improving my science and technology knowledge. After all, I wanted to be a supervillain, or support hero as I told my mom. Even back then I knew that people didn't just admit that they wanted to be supervillains. That's just silly. Mom was a bit worried at first, seeing me just go for tech and science like I had. She thought that there was something wrong with me. That I was denying something about myself. Mom wasn't sure what to do with my tech interest. She did some looking up of stuff. She bought me some junior science kits, helped get me involved with some clubs. She got me a little lab coat and watched me do experiments and asked me questions about what I was doing. Some small exasperation and worry soon turned to wonder, and then pride. When I nearly got choked out by one of those intelligence quirk kids, she taught them and their parents a real lesson. I didn't hear what she said, but apparently the other kid and her parents had to sleep with the lights on after that. Then they moved to a nearby prefecture. I really didn't want to have to deal with them and my mom didn't want me talking about them, so we moved on. Sure, we've had times where we've driven each other mad. But ultimately we love each other. My mom's just so happy that I'm doing what I love. She signed up with Bakugo's mom for this gym place and has a ton of friends there. Sure, she still worries about my dad, and I know that she worries about me and all of the explosions and fire in the basement. But she's so proud of what I've done with myself, and knowing all of this. It's just, I love my mom so much. The only person who comes close to how much I love my mom is All Might. And if anybody did anything to my mom, I would be forced to kill everybody involved and then myself. That's just a joke. That's just a joke. Kinzara Bank was fairly reputable. It was a small, local bank that had branches in Musetafu and a couple of other prefectures. The service was decent, and they were fairly generous. But Gentle Criminal knew better. He had done his own research into the bank, and he found the bank disgusting. The bank had a rather nasty loan shark business operating. It was almost like a protection racket with how they pressured businesses under them. How very ungentlemanly. Is the camera rolling, La Brava? Yes, Gentle. Danjuro smoothed down his hair. This was the moment. Confidently, Gentle burst into the bank, striding through the crowds of people to the front. Whirling around, he took a bow. Hello, Gentle viewers. I hope this video finds you well. He looked out at the people who were irately glaring at him. Attention, everyone. Please, stay calm, for I am robbing this bank. There was a brief moment of calm, of everybody looking at each other as if they couldn't believe this was happening. While the teller frantically fumbled on the desk, there was a gentle buzz in Danjuro's ear. Gentle? The door was thrown open, and Gentle craned to see who it was. MWAHAHA. Keep calm, people, for I, the supervillain known as Mastermind, am robbing this bank. The newest villain in Musetafu strode through. Gentle could see that the villain had updated his look. Rather than just a teal-green scheme, the villain now had a dark red waistcoat, thrown over a teal shirt, oversized for the obvious body armor. Poking out of the pocket was a black watch chain, connected to something small nestled in there. A black bow tie was around his neck. The shirt sleeves were rolled up, exposing more of the armor that the man wore. The belt had been redesigned, more streamlined. Even the visor itself had been upgraded, the red plastic now connected to the dark green mouthpiece and covering the whole face. The supervillain, as he called himself, looked up at Gentle. And froze, eyes evidently locked on him. Gentle Criminal was here. Gentle Criminal was here and he was already doing a job. Izuku was seeing Gentle pull a bank robbing job live. Izuku could get involved with Gentle Criminal pulling a job. Stay calm, Izuku. Introduce yourself in a cool way. Izuku opened his mouth, and let out a manly shriek. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, you're Gentle Criminal. Now everybody around them was looking at him in a confused and scared way, not sure whether to run or keep watching. He didn't care, continuing to ramble. Oh, wow. Just wow. Izuku went forwards, already pulling out a pad of paper from his utility belt. I'm your biggest fan. Please, could you sign this, please? Gentle Criminal stood there, blinking, with an expression similar to a stunned fish. At those words, he started, then looked at Izuku with wide eyes. You're my biggest fan? Izuku nodded, pen in hand. Yes. I subscribe to your channel every time it gets taken down. I have a bot that tracks for it and then auto-subscribes me. Izuku paused, pressing a button on the side of his visor. A small pump sluiced away the tears that were building up, pouring it into the coolant section of his gear. This is one signature that I've always wanted, ever since I heard of you. He took a deep bow, pad and pen presented with both hands firmly gripping the corners. Gentle Criminal took the pad, stared at it. Then, he got back the familiar look in his eyes, the look of a gentleman rogue. With a flourish, Izuku now had Gentle Criminal's signature. And it was made out to Mastermind. It said to my biggest fan. Now all Izuku had to do was get All Might's signature and he would have two great family heirlooms. Gentle Criminal coughed. It's always a pleasure to have a dedicated fan. Now. Where were we? Izuku blinked. Yes, that's right. He leaned over the counter. Could you give both of us a large sum of money please? I need it for my villainous schemes. He placed a large bag with the yen symbol prominently picked out in green ink. Gentle Criminal nodded, passing over his own briefcase. Quickly now, before the heroes get here. The teller shook. You're going viral on HeraTube. Both of you. His hands shook as he started scooping money in, slowly. Halt, villains. Some heroes had arrived, 3 of them. One of them in a more mechanical suit, another in a more traditional yellow and red spandex suit, and the last in what looked like a business suit with a fedora and domino mask. The hero in the spandex pointed a finger. Drop your weapons and surrender. Gentle turned around. Ah, it's the heroes. He turned to Mastermind, voice lowered. Tell me, have you wondered how I get out of these situations, Mastermind? Izuku just nodded, eyes sparkling. Gentle Criminal gave him a wink. It's going to be our secret. He whipped around, stance confident. Ha! You think a mere 3 heroes will give me much trouble? A few more heroes rounded the corner and readied themselves. Gentle Criminal stared for a bit. He tapped the earpiece he had. La brava. Mastermind's sensors picked up a you got it, Gentle. And then something got mumbled, before Gentle seemed to glow with power. Quickly, Mastermind focused on getting the money into his large sack in the briefcase. Gentle cracked his neck. I hate to do things in such an ungentlemanly fashion. But it cannot be helped. And then he moved. The hero in the business suit reached out and threw a pair of handcuffs that stretched and took a life of their own, only for them to get stuck in the air in front of Gentle. What? The air then bounced back, sending the handcuffs right into their owner's face. Gentle winced a bit, finishing the attack by firmly jabbing his cane into the hero and knocking the wind out of him. Gentle seemed undaunted and confident in this. But most importantly, he was not alone. Smoke surrounded the pair of them, cutting off the view from the other patrons as Mastermind leapt into the fray. One of the heroes went for Mastermind, hands sparking with electricity. Mastermind ducked his thrust and slammed the briefcase into the man's chin, sending him spiraling down. The next hero to attack, a woman in a red and black costume, stretched an arm out an impossible distance, trying to punch him in the face. Narrowly dodging, he clamped his left hand on hers. Electricity sparked, causing her to scream before Mastermind closed the distance to sock her again. The man in red and yellow took in a deep breath. Flickers of flame came around his mouth. Gentle went to gesture, but Mastermind pulled out his small freeze ray. As the hero breathed fire at the pair of them, Mastermind fired a blue-white beam back. The resultant temperature clash caused a minor explosion, sending the hero stumbling back and Gentle taking the initiative, springing off the air to deliver a blow to the gut that folded the hero like a piece of paper. The other heroes glanced between each other. A plan seemed to form for the remaining heroes, and they stood their ground, powers at the ready. Gentle and Mastermind shared their own look, then leapt back into the fray. The civilians watched with bated breath. Sure, these villains were powerful. But the heroes? They would win for sure, wouldn't they? They had to. Gentle Criminal and Loyal Subscriber team up. Kinzara Bank Heist. The video itself had started with Gentle Criminal explaining his motives for robbing the bank. There had been what looked like security camera footage, gathered by loyal fans like you, showing the owner of the bank, a man with a shark mutation threatening various business owners. One of them had had their head shoved into his mouth as his accountant made points about not paying your dues. Then the video cut to the events of the bank robbery and an unintentional team-up of bank robbers. The villains took a deep breath, composing themselves. And that's a wrap. On the screen, Gentle Criminal and Mastermind took their bow. Behind them, the Kinzara Bank had been deformed slightly, wobbling in place as if it was made of rubber. Around them, the groaning bodies of heroes, unconscious and in various positions. One of the heroes had been tied up with what looked like the hero's own handcuffs. The civilians in the hall were all unharmed, but were running away from the scene with nervous and terrified expressions on their faces. Mastermind seemed to grin, holding up both his sack of money and the briefcase. Here you go, Gentle. Always a pleasure to help out a fellow supervillain. Gentle accepted it with a warm smile on his face. And thank you, Mastermind, for your help today. Mastermind nodded, then started. He pulled something out of his pocket. I think you might find this helpful for your video, if you didn't already know about it. He then turned to the camera. Never thought I'd do this. MWAHAHA. Be afraid, heroes, for the brilliant Mastermind has struck again. Better luck next time. And with that last statement, the villain sprung away. Gentle Criminal looked in his direction where he'd left with a fond smile before turning back to the camera. If you want to support my villainy, then I want you to click that like button in a gentlemanly or ladylike fashion, subscribe and click the bell for alerts, and don't forget to leave a comment, and I will see you with the police sirens coming. Gentle Criminal pulled out a small black device. In the next video, gentle criminal, away. And with that, he threw the object on the ground, covering the area in thick purple smoke. When it cleared, he was long gone and the video ended. A furry hand closed the laptop down, the other hand pouring a cup of tea. A furry snout sniffed the tea, eyes closing in pleasure. My. The figure sitting in front of the laptop took a sip of tea. A brilliant villain like that, taking such center stage. How very interesting. Principal Nidzu gave a little grin. Technical skill, intelligence, imagination, decisiveness. Oh, I can't wait to pull you apart and see what makes you tick. The small grin on his face turned into something more feral, teeth exposed and pupils shrinking. He started to giggle, then chuckle. His grip on his teacup started to get shaky and droplets of tea started to spill everywhere as his laughter intensified. It's been so long since I've had a challenge like you. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Chapter 5, Issue 5, Partners in Crime. Izuku squinted inside the bowels of the dummy. Change over a few wires, alter the power cell, reinforce the servos again. He sighed a bit at that. Building support tech in general and villain tech specifically was hard work. Making even a crude mimic of his body took a considerable amount of skill. Sure, Izuku was skilled, but there were limits to what you could do. Most of his money had just gone to getting better tools, more advanced electronics. After being satisfied that it all worked, that everything was in order, he clicked the panel shut, screwing it back together. Alright, the Deku unit, take 5. He pressed the power button on his remote control. The machine whirred to life, internal gears grinding. A light turned on in its eyes, and then it shut down again, slumping. Izuku pumped a fist. Yes. It didn't explode. Progress. He wiped his hands clean with a rag. Now to get it to actually move around. As Izuku started checking the structure and wiring of his robot again, maybe some soft parts would help around the joints, he heard his villain phone go off. Without turning around, he shouted, "Speaker," and continued working on the insides of the robot. Oh, hello Mastermind. How have you been on this fine day? Izuku stopped everything. Gentle criminal? He rushed over to the mouthpiece, strapping it on. How did you find me? There was a soft chuckle on the other end. Well, after the success of my last video, I actually got in contact with some people in the underworld. I had to see if I could track you down, and luckily, I found Hiron who was asking around for people to follow you. Izuku smiled a bit as Gentle continued. I talked with him, and asked him if he had any way to contact you. Fortunately he gave me this number on the explicit promise that I don't tell anybody else. Hiron said that? I guess he really does deserve his high reputation. He really does. Now, I was wondering if you would like to, well, team up in the future. For Izuku, time had stopped. The only thing that could have made his day even more than this would have been All Might himself showing up, declaring him the #1 All Might fan of all time and autographing everything he owned. He stood in the middle of the basement, mouth agape and shaking slightly. Mastermind? Yes, Izuku shouted, then coughed. I mean, yes, I would love to. Splendid. Then let us meet at Hiron's office in a few minutes. I can give you directions to the abode of La Brava and I there. Izuku managed to strangle a squeal of pure happiness. Gentle criminal felt slightly awkward, sitting there in the small office. La Brava stood next to him, idly checking on her phone regarding the account they had created for his villainous efforts. Gentle cleared his throat. Are you sure he said he was coming? It's nearly our appointed meeting time. In the desk opposite, Hiron simply smirked. I know my clients. He'll come through in 3, 2, 1. Wham! The door was thrown open and Mastermind strode in, a crack of thunder coming as he did so. Greetings Hiron-san. Mastermind is here. And greetings to you as well, Gentle-sama, La Brava-san. He gave a deep bow to each of them, then sat down and he did so. Greetings Hiron-san. Mastermind is here. And greetings to you as well, Gentle-sama, La Brava-san. He gave a deep bow to each of them, then sat down in the chair left for him. Hiron smiled. Well, it's good to see a figure like you. He chuckled lowly. Having somebody like you show up means more business for me. More people seeing the benefits of good support gear. Mastermind nodded. Well, I'm glad to hear it. He leaned forwards in his chair. So, you've been doing well, Gentle-sama? Gentle just laughed, holding a hand up. Please, just Gentle would be fine. His smile widened. As for how I've been doing, The channel's doing incredibly well. Yeah. La Brava piped up, holding her phone out. We've gotten positive comments this time. And people are actually subscribing and taking us seriously. She shot Mastermind a look of gratitude which the self-proclaimed supervillain seemed to blush and start to flail. Gentle just waved it off with an easy smile. And it's all thanks to you, Mastermind. Mastermind spluttered, finger pointing at himself. And me? I had been doing my own investigation on that bank, and what I found was bad. But I didn't go so far as to have recording devices set up to capture illegal acts like that. Gentle bowed, which had Mastermind stammer and fumble over his words to get him to stand up. Please, Gentle. No, the praise is yours, Gentle Criminal replied. You went above and beyond with that, and as a result I have to admit. For all I inspired you, I know that working alongside you I could be greater. Gentle. It's okay. La Brava tried to reassure him, with Mastermind repeating her assurances. Gentle just shook his head. That's why La Brava and I wanted to work together with you. As partners, definitely. He grinned. I've been in this business for longer than you have and I can teach you some things yet. Mastermind sat there, seemingly unsure of what to say. Then he shook himself, regained his composure. If you, the brilliant villain Gentle Criminal, want to work with me, the supervillain Mastermind, as a partner. How can I say no? Thunder roared in the small office, Huron scowling a bit. MWAHAHA. Together, we'll shake the world of heroes to its core. MWAHAHA. There was the sound of clapping behind him. Magnificent, truly magnificent. Mastermind and Gentle Criminal spun around to see the new figure in the doorway, wearing a black waistcoat and slacks with an orange shirt, blank white mask with a grin etched on it with a top hat. The tall man behind them continued clapping, before taking a bow. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in the flesh. I have to admit, my mind was halfway made up when Huron gave me a call about your situation, Mastermind. Mastermind spluttered a bit. Well, what? The tall man started. Oh, I haven't introduced myself properly. He pulled a pair of small marbles out from his pocket and tossed them in front of him. A pair of floodlights sprang into existence, casting him into shadow. I am known as Mr. Compress, magician, villain, showman. He took another bow, arm sweeping into a dignified position. And for the purpose of this conversation, interested in working under a villain like you. Mastermind stared blankly. Huh? Mr. Compress chuckled. Your presentation is pretty good for an amateur, which is most of the reason I am here. I chose you over others because you've got a different look to you than other villains. You have a sincere belief that you can change things. His tone of voice changed, becoming more serious. You want to change the world of heroes, in your own way. Odd in somebody as young as you are. Mastermind seemed to still. Gentle looked at the man next to him, watched his fist clench. I do. Whatever he'd been thinking about seemed to clear, and he perked right back up. If you wish to be the first of my dastardly minions? Then we can start our works right away. With all of us working together. He started to chuckle, hand gripping his tiny device. The world of heroes will never know what hit it. MWAHAHA. MWAHAHA. Toshinori Yagi nodded approvingly at Mirio. You're doing an excellent job, he remarked, his successor beaming up at him. Tagata Mirio's schedule was pretty busy. As well as schoolwork, he also had to continue his internship with Sir Night Eye's hero agency. Coming here to the beach helped give him additional breaks as well as train his body to handle One for All. Toshinori approved of the boy's drive, and he could see that the boy's easy smile and confidence would mark him as a future symbol of peace. So why did he feel so uneasy about passing the quirk to him? Come on Toshi, listen to me. Do not pass One for All to him. Is anything getting through your successor's thick head? 7? He was always stubborn like this. We have to keep trying. One for All will kill that boy and he won't even know why. Come on Yagi, listen to our voices. Try harder dude. Yagi grunted, hand clasped to his head and the copper tang of blood in his mouth. He was getting a lot more headaches lately, and his scar had been aching like mad. He didn't know why, maybe it was getting close to the anniversary of his master's death. That always made his scar ache. Mirio looked at him with concern. Are you alright, all Yagi-sensei? Yagi just sighed, rubbing his temples with a pained smile. A bit of a headache, young Mirio. Nothing more. Mirio looked like he wanted to say more, but then returned to the work at the beach. We were so close, Damn it. Let's tie a different tack. Keep going for the gut instinct. Odd to hear you like this, too. Please. I think the man and his apprentice are insufferably naive and overblown. It doesn't mean that I want the kid to die young. That, and I don't want to hear Eight's whining. Yagi winced. He really needed to talk with somebody about these headaches. That, and sometimes he'd had dreams where his master had been trying to talk to him, only he couldn't hear her voice, only a few muffled words. It was as if she was talking in the next room over. Then the usual nightmares started and it all got worse. Maybe he needed to take that therapy hound dog had been talking about after all. He may have landed a deadly blow on my brother, but he barely received the first vision we gave to him. We'll have to keep trying. Say, Yagi-sensei, I was kind of curious about one thing, Mirio said, starting on hauling a fridge across the sand towards the designated tipping point. Yes? Well. You said that this was a power passed down through the generations, right? Yagi nodded, mind going to what he thought was coming. It seemed like his headache had let up a bit at those words. Right. There were 7 users before me. With this training, you should be ready to be the 9th. Mirio nodded, shoving the fridge further up the beach. Young Midoriya was standing there with his own parts, encouraging young Mirio to come to him. Yagi wasn't sure what the other young man was building. He could see some wheels, various electronics, what looked like most of a car and other pieces that he couldn't identify. Mirio was able to push it quite far before he needed a breather, and to get his thoughts in order. So, I was curious about the past bearers of One for All. What were they like? Investigate, Toshi. Come on, investigate. This is the right thing to do. Look us up. Look me up for that matter. IT can't be that hard, right? Stop being a naive, muscle-brained idiot and listen to us for once. Toshinori Yagi blinked, then smiled. Well, I can't see the harm in knowing more about the past bearers. Oh, thank God. Toshinori winced. Yeah, it would be a good idea to look up the predecessors. He'd been a bit curious about the matter itself, and it seemed that thinking about those who came before him had cleared up his headache. Could it be a sign from One for All, those past generations encouraging him on this path? Probably just a coincidence that it cleared up. He'd still do the research though. It might be helpful for young Mirio to learn about the predecessors. See how they handled One for All with their different quirks. Then he'd have to see about getting some Panadol. These headaches had been getting more intense lately. How can somebody this smart be so dumb? Some days after Mastermind had been on the beach, and he'd received a call from Hiron. It turned out that Mr. Compress wasn't the only one who'd answered Hiron's call about being a henchman under Mastermind. Honestly, Mastermind hadn't expected to have so many people go along with his cheerful little job ad he'd had Hiron pass around. He looked at the job advert in his hand again. For those who wish to aid an up-and-coming supervillain oppose the heroes and pursue supervillainy, please apply at Hiron's or my number. Not interested in people who want to hurt others for fun. He had vaguely hoped that people would respond to his advert, but here they were in the rather dirty bar that Hiron had set up as a meeting spot. There were a couple of other people there who actually wanted to help him. It was a bit of a new feeling, to have other people who shared at least part of his vision. So, my name's Mastermind. I'm pleased to meet you. He bowed, quickly and deeply, then straightened up. The first person to answer did so with a giggle, white-gloved hand coming up to her mouth. She vaguely resembled a cat, with sharp pointy ears at the top of her head and a distinctly feline muzzle. Her body was covered in an ink-black fur that contrasted sharply with her paper-white muzzle. A thick mound of hair the same shade as her body curler around her head. Mastermind was pretty sure she was wearing a bodysuit as dark as the rest of her with a long red jacket thrown over it along with white sneakers, otherwise she'd shown up naked. And considering how curvy she was, that would be pretty embarrassing for him. No, she was wearing a bodysuit. He was sure of that. Pleasure's all ours. She gave a wide grin, thrusting out a hand. You're a bit shorter in person than I thought you would be. Since I guess we're going by villain names, call me Inkblot. Nice to meet somebody as polite as you. The second man gave a wide grin. That was about the only facial feature that Mastermind could make out from beneath the nearly head-covering black mask the man wore. His skin was tinted a shimmering gold, which made his teeth stand out amidst the near-blinding color. He was wearing a yellow pinstripe suit, slightly oversized, dirty and rumpled. As for the rest of him, he was slightly taller than Mastermind. Call me Golden Grin. You're aiming to mess with the heroes? I can get behind that. He kept his hands shoved in his pockets. Honestly, I came because I half thought it was a joke. The third looked like a wreck of a man, who hadn't really slept well. He was disheveled and unkempt, with what looked like surgical swabs under a brown overcoat on for a costume. Like him, they were stained and worn. He was skinny and pale, with long delicate fingers like a pianist. A light blue disposable face mask covered his face, his matted black hair swept back into a messy ponytail. But I liked the bit in your advert about not hurting people for fun. He stank of whiskey and cheap cigarettes, but his purple eyes were sharp. Is that true? Mastermind nodded. Absolutely. He leaned forwards. I'm not doing this because I want to hurt people. I'm a supervillain, not a monster. The others traded looks. Most people would argue that a supervillain, by definition, hurts people. Golden Grin pointed out. Mastermind shook his head. No, that's a villain. I'm a supervillain, and hurting people is not what I'm interested in. He shot out of his seat and began pacing. Sure, I won't deny that I've had to fight people. But I, Mastermind Thunder roared, causing everybody else to jump slightly, am not some petty villain running around using their abilities to hurt other people. I am pursuing supervillainy to shake society at its core. The man seemed to weigh it up. Well, you can call me Stitch. I'm a doctor for people who need it. I may have had my medical license revoked, but I still took the Hippocratic Oath. His eyes bored into Mastermind's like thermite through a steel door. You try and get me to hurt other people, kid, I'm leaving. Mastermind tilted his head. Why should I? The other villains shared a look at each other. Golden Grin was the first to start talking. This is weird. I mean, sure, I'm not a very experienced villain, but I get the feeling that this isn't exactly normal. Yeah. Usually the boss gets all grumpy and pushes people around if they aren't respected. Opined Inkblot. Mastermind just laughed. That's because they're villains. I'm a supervillain. Mastermind looked over all the people who had assembled. I'm guessing that you have some idea of what I typically do, yes? Inkblot nodded rapidly, head a blur. Sure do. You're a great ham. You just go in and use that crazy support gear to pull off your crimes. That, and you did that weird save. And you and Gentle must have gone, like wham. Bam. Her arms flailed around as she spoke, with no regards to things like joints and nearly hitting her fellow villains. Yeah, you really showed those heroes, huh? You're pretty critical of them as well, aren't you? Mastermind nodded. I'm aiming to be a higher class of criminal. What the world needs is a supervillain, to show those other villains how to do it. To give the heroes something proper that can remind them why they put on their spandex. He looked over each of them. But I think you guys are still on the fence. Golden Grin shrugged. I don't mind. You're messing with the heroes, and that's honestly hilarious. He gave Mastermind a slightly different look, appraising. I suppose I should ask, what's in it for us? Mastermind looked down at the ground. I have to admit, I really can't pay you that much. I can offer support gear and some of the haul of any robbery we do, but that's all I can offer. He then shook himself, looking each of them in the eye. This is a promise that I probably won't be able to back up. It's foolish. He stood there, stance confident. But I can promise you that on any job that we pull, nobody gets left behind. And if you do go to jail, I will come for you and break you out. He actually took off his mouthpiece, revealing a small yet confident smile to each of them before replacing it. Now, are you definitely going to join me in my nefarious pursuits? The trio of villains looked at each other for a moment. Then they turned back to him. Look, Mastermind, Inkblot started, sounding unusually solemn. I've always loved acting. Even worked in TV at one point. Getting to play the villain like this? Her grin was surprisingly happy. It's gonna be great. So I'm definitely in. Golden Grin looked at him next. I haven't been a villain for very long either. I just want to live my life without people getting on my case all the time, and I'm not really interested in fighting. A job like this, where I can just help you out with your schemes and not have to fight. A dream come true. Stitch was the last. Well, you're clearly either crazy or stupid. But I guess I can get behind a kid like you. Mastermind clapped his hands together. Splendid. Welcome aboard, my minions. I've had a great heist in the works for just such an occasion. How about you all meet me at this address? He handed out pieces of paper, where he'd written out Gentle's flat, and I'll get the catering sorted to celebrate. They each took the cards, blinking. Inkblot was the first to speak. Okay, you are definitely not like the other villains. Is there going to be cake? Mastermind seemed to grin. Say no more, minions, Thunder roared yet again. MWAHAHAHA. Kamui Woods and Mount Lady had been helping some people around town when they heard their radios crackle with Death Arm's voice. Kamui Woods, Mount Lady. Villain incoming. Who? Kamui Woods asked, wooden limbs thickening and stretching up to the roofs to get a better vantage point. Mount Lady continued go guide people out of the way, citing a potential villain capture. This just caused people to want to stay more, but most of them got the message and made themselves scarce. It's Mastermind. He's just broken into a store and made off with their product. Mount Lady frowned, scanning ahead and mapping the route ahead of her for when she had to intercept. What's he stolen? 40 cakes from that top-end bakery Bespin cakes. Really expensive ones, too. Mount Lady just blinked. Eh? Why 40 cakes? Kamui Wood shook his head, keeping an eye out. That's what we don't know. For all we know it's to power some evil device, or for some other scheme. Mount Lady shot into her giant form. Where's the villain heading? Coming your way down the main street. Be ready. Mount Lady and Kamui Woods traded a look, then charged off. Ahead of them, they could see sirens blaring as the police came through. With faces set in determination, they continued on. This villain had escaped them once, he would not escape them again. Kamui Woods leapt from rooftop to rooftop while Mount Lady simply charged on ahead, the roads being cleared to allow the gigantification heroine to make her way through without incident. They came to a scene that was surprisingly tame compared to many other villain scenes. Death Arms was standing with the police barricade, face set in a grim scowl as he watched the villain approaching. Mastermind was driving a small car that was built in a similar fashion to a small ambulance, evidently where he was keeping his illegally acquired bounty. He'd painted it teal, with red hubcaps on the wheels. MWAHAHA. You'll never catch me like that, heroes. Death Arms scowled. Give up peacefully, Mastermind. Honestly, Kamui Woods grunted, wooden arms already starting to unfurl and ripple in preparation for his finishing move, stealing 40 cakes? That's terrible. There's nowhere for you to run this time. Mount Lady shouted, keeping her stance wide in case she had to grab the car. Mastermind seemed to smile. That's certainly true. However, he seemed to reach down and push a button, and then his vehicle seemed to sink lower to the ground as he came closer and closer. You have forgotten something about me. The car came closer, and closer to the barricade. Death Arms stood resolute, and started spinning his arm in place. Electricity sparked along his arm and fist, building up a mightier and mightier charge. Kamui Woods built up more and more wood, watching the approaching vehicle. Mount Lady stood ready to try and pin him in place, a scowl on her face. Mastermind does not run, he escapes. The car sprang. It shot up and forwards like a rocket, slipping over the police barricade and between Kamui Woods' grasping branches. Mount Lady was just able to lunge to the side and grab it. No escape this time, Mastermind. Kamui Woods roared, branches already reshaping themselves. You're wanted for robbing a support company, breaking into a bank, using your quirk illegally, resisting arrest and right now, attempted grand theft cake. Mount Lady glared down at the small figure in the vehicle, who gave her a little wave. Hello, Mount Lady, sorry about this. Mount Lady looked at him, wary. Sorry about while Mastermind slammed a hand onto the roof of the vehicle, and the whole thing suddenly sparked with electricity. She screamed as the electricity went through her, causing her to lose her grip on the small vehicle. It slammed onto the road then tore off, weaving around Kamui Woods' branches. Mount Lady shrugged off the effects, and with a roar of anger started running after the fleeing vehicle, stopping briefly to grab Death Arms and carry him with her. Mastermind bobbed and weaved, heading towards a busier road. As he did so, smoke came out from the car, turning into a green smokescreen. Oh, no you don't, Mount Lady snarled. Making a grand sweeping gesture, she started to clear the smoke from in front of them. A couple of cars went past, briefly blocking their view, but they were able to keep on his trail as he diverted from his original route and headed down a different street, maniacal robot laughter sounding along the way. Mount Lady's grin turned positively feral and she picked up the pace. This was it. They had this little twerp. The way that Mastermind had been going, he would hit another police cordon. Traffic went away from the running giant woman with a hero in hand as the vehicle came to a stop in front of the police barrier. There's nowhere to run, Mastermind. Death Arms hollered, as dignified as he could be with his position. Come out with your hands. Mount Lady looked at the scene, adrenaline burning away, and then she saw it. Oh, No, she mumbled. Death Arms looked up at her with a confused expression. Shakily, she pointed at the vehicle they'd been chasing. Looking at it properly. Is it slightly transparent? Mount Lady nodded, sinking to her knees with a dull expression on her face. In front of them, the image of the car flickered and faded, revealing a much smaller vehicle, only the size of a child's buggy with a massive block of holographic projectors on it. There were even a few small cameras and a radio, still blaring Mastermind's mocking laughter. Death Arms swore, the police already starting to fan out. And then the damn thing melted, leaving only a blackened sludge. They'd missed him. The car was inspired. I'd been practicing driving simulations, so then I came up with the idea for my own vehicle to carry greater heists. A few trips to the beach with the help of Yagi-san and Mirio-senpai, and I had my materials. It took a couple of days for everything to work and for me to be confident driving it, but that was all worthwhile. The holographic mini vehicle though? That really took a lot of effort to get it to work. And it didn't have to be perfect, just good enough. Rip out a few defunct Roomba brains, rig them up to cameras and a much smaller car, then tear out some defunct tech to make crude and rude holographic projection, and done. After that the plan was simple. Projecting a smokescreen behind you to make it look like you're getting away. Actually, deploy your decoy in a different direction and turn on the prototype cloaking device, only good for a minute or two, but a minute is enough for the heroes to think they have you. Then, continue on your original path. Right here, to a drop-off point, Mastermind cackled. He pressed a few more buttons on his gauntlet, and the vehicle collapsed, revealing a couple of drones. A few more button presses and they were in the air, disguises flickering to turn into 2 different transport drones. Very soon, there'd be major deliveries, and 2 drones would be missed in the chaos. The Mastermobile, as he called it, folded up further, taking on a smaller form. Now, to make my escape there was a flicker of movement in one of the cameras of his hood. Right behind and above him, Mastermind turned, and narrowly dodged the coiling gray scarf. The figure that was now in front of him, Mastermind recognized him. Black jumpsuit, black, scraggly hair, already standing on edge and waving in the air. A pair of yellow goggles and a coiling, scarf-like weapon in hand. Playtime's over, villain, Eraserhead stated firmly, capture weapon coiled and ready to strike. Hope you guys enjoy, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, it will help me a lot, and see you guys later, peace.